In the Missouri Valley of 1899, when the last glow of daylight stretched over the wheat fields, there was a patch of land the locals whispered about. It belonged to Elias Turner, a hard-working farmer known for his quiet strength and stubborn pride. His land, hollow acres, was unlike any other in the valley. At sunrise it was beautiful, dew shimmering like glass beads across tall golden wheat. But by afternoon, the light would dim for no reason. The hills around it cast strange, shifting shadows that crept farther each day, as though chasing something unseen. Elias lived in a weathered farmhouse with his wife, Clara, and their 8-year-old son, Henry. They weren't wealthy, but they were content. Elias would say, "So long as a man's got good soil and a family who loves him, he's rich enough." But lately, his soil had grown restless. The wheat refused to grow straight, twisting toward the earth instead of the sun. Some nights, Elias would stand by the porch, staring at the dark line where the light stopped short of his fields. It looked as though the shadows had decided the land belonged to them. He didn't know it yet, but his farm was about to remember something it had been trying to forget for decades. One chilly morning, Elias hitched his old mule to the cart and rode into town for supplies. The general store smelled of coffee beans and pipe smoke. While he loaded sacks of flour, a grizzled peddler sitting by the stove looked up and said, "You're the Turner boy, ain't ya? The one livin' by the hollow?" Elias nodded cautiously. The peddler spat into a tin can. "That land of yours don't hold peace, son. It holds remnants. Men buried there weren't given prayers. You're planting your wheat right over their bones." Elias forced a chuckle. "I don't believe in ghost tales, old man. My crops fail 'cause of drought, not the dead." But the peddler leaned forward, his cloudy eyes sharp. "So you say. But remember, a field remembers everything you feed it, even what's not sown with seed." Elias shrugged him off, but the words clung to his mind all the way home. When he reached his property, he noticed something strange. The western rows of his wheat were blackened, as though scorched, though no fire had touched them. The air smelled faintly of metal, like blood. He knelt and touched a stalk. It broke apart in his hand, dark grains spilling like ash. The shadows had begun their harvest. That night, after supper, Elias grabbed his lantern and walked out to the fields. The wind was still, the sky heavy with stars. As he reached the middle of his land, he froze. There were voices, soft murmuring, rising and falling like a distant crowd. He turned, heart pounding, but saw nothing, only the wheat swaying though the air was perfectly still. He knelt down, pressing his ear to the soil. The sound became clear, a woman's voice, faint and trembling. "Find me." Elias stumbled back, nearly dropping his lantern. His breath came in sharp gasps. The light flickered wildly, throwing long, writhing shadows across the rows. For a brief second he saw a shape standing among them, a dark figure that shimmered, then vanished. When he told Clara, she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Maybe it's the wind, Eli." The valley carries strange sounds this time of year, but her eyes darted toward the window, where the fields glowed silver in the moonlight, an ocean of shadows that seemed alive. Harvest season arrived earlier than usual. Elias rose before dawn, gripping his sickle and stepping into the fields. But when he sliced through the first stalk, a thick black sap oozed from the cut, dark as ink. He wiped his hands, but the stain wouldn't fade. It clung like oil, soaking into his skin. Then he noticed something else: faces in the wheat. As sunlight hit the darkened grains, faint impressions seemed to form in the stalks. One face smiled, another wept. But one froze him cold. It was his brother, Samuel Turner, who died in the war 12 years ago. Elias fell backward, heart hammering. He blinked, and the faces were gone. Only the whisper of the wind remained. From behind him came a sound, like a voice carried on the breeze. The land remembers Eli. He ran from the field, his hands still blackened, his soul trembling. Elias couldn't ignore the signs any longer. The following morning, he hitched his wagon and rode to the far edge of the valley to visit Widow Marin, an old woman rumored to be a healer, or a witch, depending on who you asked. Her cottage sat beneath a twisted oak. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling, and smoke from a small fire curled into the rafters. Elias told her everything: the black sap, the voices, the shadows. She listened without interruption, her eyes half closed. When he finished, she said quietly, "That land remembers sorrow. During the war, soldiers, Union and Confederate alike, were buried where they fell. The earth drank their pain, and pain, when buried, grows roots." Elias swallowed hard. "What do they want from me?" "The same thing all lost souls want," Widow Marin said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Peace, but the soil won't rest until you uncover what was hidden." She handed him a pouch of white sage. "Burn this when you go into your field again. If you hear them call, listen. Sometimes the land don't just whisper. It begs." Elias left her house with more questions than answers, and a growing dread in his heart. That evening, as rain began to patter against the roof, Elias sat alone by the kitchen table. A sudden thought tugged at him, a letter he'd once hidden, long ago. He opened an old drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. On the front, written in Samuel's handwriting, were the words, "For Eli, if I don't return." His hands shook as he opened it. "Dear Eli, if this reaches you, it means the war has taken me. But before I go, I need you to know I forgive Ma, and I forgive you too. Don't let the shadows of the past take root. They'll choke the life out of you if you let them." Elias reread the letter again and again, confused. Forgive him? For what? Then a memory flickered. His mother crying, Samuel shouting, the two brothers fighting the night Samuel left for war. But what happened after? Elias couldn't remember. It was as if his mind had sealed it away. Outside, thunder rolled. The shadows on the walls seemed to move. Clara began waking at night, her face pale, her eyes wet with tears. "Eli," she whispered one night, trembling. "I saw him. Your brother. He was standing in the field. He said the land remembers what you buried." Elias sat up in bed, his chest tight. "What I buried?" But Clara didn't answer. She just stared toward the window, where faint lightning flickered. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The rain beat down like footsteps. He could almost hear Samuel's voice calling through the storm. The next morning, Henry ran into the house, dirt on his hands and excitement in his eyes. "Papa! Look what I found!" He held up a silver locket, tarnished and cracked. Inside was a faded picture of two boys, Elias and Samuel. Elias froze. "Where did you get this?" "In the field," Henry said. "The shadows showed me where to dig." Elias's heart pounded. He took the locket, recognizing the engraving, their mother's initials. It had vanished the night Samuel went missing. When night came, Elias took a lantern and walked to the spot Henry had pointed out. He dug into the soft earth. A few feet down, his shovel struck wood. He uncovered a small wooden box. Inside were a handful of bones, a rusted bullet casing, and a folded letter wrapped in cloth. Elias knelt in the moonlight, trembling as he unfolded the letter. The ink was smudged, but the words were still legible. It was written by his mother, addressed to Samuel. "My dearest boy, if this reaches you, it means my sins have found me. I begged Elias to stop you from going to war. When you fought him, he struck you in anger. He didn't know you'd fall on that stone. He didn't know you'd never rise again. I buried you there myself to spare him the truth. He's lived believing you died in battle. I pray God forgives us both." Elias's vision blurred as tears streamed down his face. He dropped the letter, clawing at the dirt with his hands. "No, no, that's not true," he screamed into the night. "I didn't, Samuel." But the land answered him in whispers, soft, sorrowful, echoing his brother's name. The sky darkened. Wind tore through the valley like an angry spirit. The rain came heavy and wild. Elias stood barefoot in the mud, clutching the letter, shouting into the storm, "Samuel! If you can hear me, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean it." The lightning flashed, illuminating the field, and there, rising from the wheat, were figures made of shadow, shaped like men. They swayed in silence as though listening. Then from among them, one figure stepped forward. It wore the outline of his brother's face. "Eli," the voice whispered, gentle and broken. "All I wanted was your truth." Elias fell to his knees, weeping. "I remember now. I remember everything." The shadow smiled faintly, then dissolved into rain. The storm broke apart, the sky clearing into dawn. The curse was lifting, but the guilt in Elias's heart would take longer to fade. When morning came, the storm was gone. The sun broke through in soft streaks of gold, and the fields of hollow acres shimmered under the dew. Elias stepped barefoot into the soil, expecting to see the blackened wheat, the twisted stalks, but everything looked new. The once dark crop now glowed the color of honey, swaying gently in a quiet breeze. No whispers, no shapes, no shadows, only the stillness of peace. Clara found him kneeling among the wheat, his eyes wet, his hands trembling. "It's over, Eli," she said softly. He nodded, but his heart ached. "I freed the land," he whispered, "but not myself." Because now every inch of that earth reminded him not of curses or spirits, but of his brother's forgiveness. And forgiveness, he realized, was harder to accept than guilt. 2 days later, Widow Marin arrived unannounced, her shawl fluttering like crow wings in the breeze. She looked out over the golden fields and smiled faintly. "You've done it," she said. "The land breathes easy again." Elias stood quietly beside her. "He came to me," he said. "My brother." He said all he wanted was the truth. I gave it. And now the shadows are gone. The widow nodded. Truth cleanses what prayer cannot. But the curse didn't start in the soil. It started in the heart. Make peace with that, and you'll be free too. She reached into her pocket and placed something in his hand, a tiny seed, dark as coal. "Plant this," she said. "It'll remind you that even darkness can grow light if tended with care." Elias kept the seed close, unsure what to do with it. In the days that followed, Elias began to notice something remarkable. The soil, once stubborn and dry, now felt rich and soft beneath his fingers. He could almost feel it breathing. He decided to stop growing wheat. Instead, he took the seed the widow had given him, split it into a handful of smaller ones, and began planting sunflowers, rows and rows of them. When Clara asked why, he said, "Because they follow the light, no matter where it goes. That's how I want this land to live now." The neighbors thought he was foolish. "You can't eat flowers," they said, but Elias didn't care. He wasn't planting for profit anymore. He was planting for peace. Weeks passed. The sunflowers began to grow, tiny green shoots rising from the once cursed ground. Each morning, Clara would watch her husband walk among them with a quiet smile, whispering to the soil as if speaking to old friends. Sometimes she'd join him, bringing Henry along. "Papa," Henry asked one morning, "why do you talk to the dirt?" Elias smiled. "Because sometimes the dirt listens better than people." Clara laughed softly, brushing the dust from his sleeve. But she knew these weren't just flowers to him. They were memorials. Each stem, each bloom, was an unspoken apology to his brother, a promise that no pain would be buried again. One summer day, a young traveler stopped by Elias's farm seeking water. He was a stranger with a notebook, saying he collected stories of the valley. The man shaded his eyes, looking out over the wide field of golden blooms. "Never seen sunflowers grow this tall," he said. "Why plant them instead of wheat?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because wheat feeds the body, but light feeds the soul." And this land's soul was starving. The traveler scribbled something down, then asked, "Do you believe the land can forgive?" Elias looked across the field, his gaze distant. "Forgiveness isn't something you wait to receive," he said. "It's something you grow yourself." The traveler left without saying another word, but years later, that same story would find its way into a small-town newspaper titled "The Farmer Who Harvested Shadows." Every year on the anniversary of Samuel's death, Elias and his family began a tradition. They would light lanterns and set them at the edge of the sunflower field, one for every lost soul who might still wander the valley. That first night was windless and quiet. The lanterns flickered softly, their glow reflecting in Elias's eyes. He whispered to the dark horizon, "Brother, I carried the weight of your death too long. I hope you found peace, wherever you are." A faint breeze stirred the flowers, and for a brief moment, one of the lantern flames flickered higher, burning steady, as if answering him, and Clara swore she saw a figure of light standing among the sunflowers, watching them before slowly fading into the stars. The next morning, the valley looked different. The sunlight seemed warmer, gentler, almost sacred. Travelers who passed through said the air around Hollow Acres felt lighter, as if the valley itself was breathing again, after a long, dark dream. Elias watched the sunflowers turn their faces toward the dawn and said quietly to Henry, "See, boy? Even after the longest night, the light always finds its way back." Henry grinned. "Even for us?" Elias ruffled his hair. "Especially for us." From that day on, Hollow Acres was never called Cursed again. It was called the Field of Light. Years passed, and the Turner family grew. Henry took over the farming as Elias grew older and slower, but the sunflowers never stopped blooming. People came from nearby towns just to walk among them. Travelers said the place carried something holy, a calm that mended broken hearts. Elias would often sit on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the visitors from afar. Some cried, some smiled. Many left small trinkets in the soil, letters, medals, even photographs, like they were leaving pieces of sorrow behind. He'd smile and say to Clara, "Maybe that's what this farm was meant for all along, not to feed the belly, but to heal the spirit." One autumn morning, Elias didn't wake with the dawn as he usually did. Clara found him sitting quietly by the window, staring out at the fields bathed in morning light. "The flowers are beautiful this year," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "They always bloom brightest before the frost." That night, the moon rose full over Hollow Acres. Elias took one last walk through the sunflowers, feeling the cool breeze brush his face. He stopped at the northern edge, the place where Samuel had once been buried. He knelt down, pressing his palm to the soil. "It's time," he whispered. "You can rest now." "We both can." When Clara went to check on him the next morning, she found him lying peacefully among the flowers, a small sunflower clasped in his hand. The man who had once harvested shadows had finally found his light. Years later, Hollow Acres became a landmark. People came from far and wide to see the endless sea of sunflowers swaying under the Missouri sun. They said the field had a kind of hum to it, soft, like a lullaby carried by the wind, Locals told a story that on certain moonlit nights, you could still see the faint silhouette of an old farmer walking along the edge of the fields, lantern in hand, keeping watch over his crops. Children would ask, "Who is he?" And their parents would smile and say, "That's Elias Turner, the farmer who harvested shadows and planted light." As the years passed, the legend spread across the valley and beyond. It became not just a tale of ghosts, but of forgiveness, of how even the darkest land can bloom again if love and truth take root. And when the wind rustled through the flowers, it carried his final whisper through the valley: "Tend your soil, forgive your shadows, and the light will always return."